in my game face. Ain't no stopping me, you know I'm coming in first place. Won't stop until I get that ring. I'ma dominate all day. No matter who you bring, I will not lose.
Yeah.
I will not lose.
I will not lose.
You know, just the muscle memory and kind of quick reactions or quick decision making maybe wasn't there all the time, but still, you know, it showed that if you're a big, strong wrestler and you can, you know, hit hard or take a shot, you know, you can do well in mixed martial arts, especially back in the day. And I also, you know, as I referenced, lots of overseas stuff, you know, early days MMA, you know, they're not all a part of some big governing body like the you know, UFC or the PFL or something like that. You know, they fought for different promotions. Guys weren't necessarily signing like long contracts or things like that per se. It might be more one-off fights or kind of what events happening. You know, what can I do? I mean, if you look at guys' records even back in the day, sometimes they're fighting MMA fights, you know, multiple times a month or multiple times over the course of a couple months. And now it's like you want to have time to recover, things like that. Honestly, guys used to have single-day tournaments where they're, you know, fighting multiple guys in one day and having to deal with whatever injuries they have from the previous fights and just going forward and knocking, you know, 3 guys out or taking out, you know, multiple guys in a day. So that's kind of the era that Mark Coleman comes from. You know, basically the story is that, you know, he was at home. I believe he lived with his parents, or he lives with his parents. You know, he saved them as the article kind of mentions. But basically there was a big fire in his house, and his dog Hammer, who I'll get to, you know, talk about Hammer a little bit, you know, after I get to the, you know, main point of the story. But basically Hammer kind of alerted Mark, and what I've heard since then is that Mark, you know, he basically like was already in a situation. Oops, sorry about that. What the heck is going on here? Anywho, sorry about that. Yeah, but Mark Coleman, Dog Hammer came in to rescue him or alert him, and basically he said it was already to the point where he wasn't sure if he could breathe or see or do anything. It was already that level of smoke kind of, you know, surrounding him and throughout the house. And basically, I think he said he had to kind of go outside for a quick second just to be able to catch his breath, to be able to do anything. And then he went in one by one, walked his elderly parents out of the house, basically went back in to go try and save Hammer, and couldn't find Hammer and passed out in the house and was eventually rescued, and, you know, in critical condition, but he's since been alert over the last few days, speaking with his family, posting some things on social media, you know, saying how happy he is to be with his family, to be alive. Hammer unfortunately did not make it, the dog. Honestly, really, really sad. Obviously, like, you know, you want to save the human lives and things like that. And, you know, there's nothing negative about, you know, anything that happened in terms of the heroics of Mark Coleman or things like that. But it's really, you know, again, it's just what a good boy, you know, as they say. Like, I'm not trying to make a joke or anything either. I mean, it's just truly this dog saved Mark Coleman, saved his life, you know, had to, you know, pay with his life, unfortunately. But, yeah, I just want to shout out Mark Coleman, shout out Hammer, you know, saved his family here. I'm sure they'll talk about it a little bit. But, yeah, Hammer, man, he was the one, right? He was the guy that saved everyone's life. So really shout out to Hammer and shout out to Mark Coleman for going in there and saving his parents. So, you know, just kind of a sad but beautiful story at the same time. And I kind of also want to just, you know, as I mentioned, Mark Coleman was let me get this volume down a tiny bit for everybody. Hammer, it was the kind of first thing they screamed, Mark the Hammer Coleman highlights. Hammer smashed face is the name of this YouTube video here. Boom, going in there. You see the old grainy stuff. But yeah, that guy's in a gi he's fighting against. I'll turn this volume down a little bit. Sorry. Cool little, I don't mind the music per se. I'll start it up a little bit. I don't know why I can't get rid of that, minimize that. But you see it, Mark Coleman's already getting like guillotined as he's trying to take somebody down. So the guy's kind of using different styles, grabbing the fence there. I mean, things that you can't get away with. But yeah, Mark Coleman's getting in there, grabbing the double leg takedown, ferocious kind of wrestling, duck under, Mark sprawling, protecting himself from getting taken down, going in for another takedown. All these guys going for the guillotine. Throw that leg kick, leave your leg out there. Mark's going to grab it, take you down. Just kind of use that top pressure. You can see very, you know, big back, strong guy, moves quick, really good grip strength. Yeah, he's just TKO. He's getting on top of guys. You know, it's very exhausting. As much as anything, you know, obviously, like, look, people who strike or, use jujitsu, or I'm gonna turn the. I can't find the sweet spot with the volume. But yeah, the guys grabbing outside of the cage, crazy. You see these rings here. If it's more of like a ring aesthetic, that's gonna be probably in Japan. And Pride was the OG MMA organization out there. And yeah, I mean, again, like guys might be vicious strikers and look like they're walking out there like badasses and ready to knock Mark Coleman out, but when you get taken down, you get grabbed, you never experienced that before. I mean, it's one of those things that guys don't know what to do. So. And you see that this guy's about to tap just from his neck being grabbed like that because he's just so unsure of what to do. That guy's facing the fence. Here's Don Fry, another legend who I'll probably talk about one day. Let's look like a little headbutt there. Jesus. It used to be, it's a brutal sport now, but even back then with like less technique and more just like less money, guys aren't really making a lot of money doing this. I mean, nowadays guys still aren't making as much money as they could be. And back then, it was just really about being a tough guy, proving yourself, proving that all the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into your career in wrestling or whatever discipline you're in. And look, they're bare knuckle too. So they got shoes on and they're punching bare knuckles and grabbing faces. Yeah, Mark's just squeezing that guy. I mean, that's not, there's probably a neck crank, might be the name of that submission, but it's not really a choke or anything. You see here just, oh man, headbutting, dude. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, this footage is really like brutal for sure. But at the same time, it's sloppy looking, right? But it's one of those things where I'm a big, I'll talk about this stuff with Black Gritty on the streams on Tuesday nights at some point. But I'm an MJ guy. I think Michael Jordan's the greatest basketball player of all time. His era is certainly not quite as old looking, I would say, as this is compared to modern MMA. But there's this whole kind of trend right now, like we're done with the 90s, we're done with the 80s, because a lot of the basketball back then looked sloppy and not as good. And again, it was in a lot of ways less talented, less skilled, less strategic, but at the same time, you can see how certain players or people would translate in terms of their skill sets and things like that. And it's like whatever knowledge you had at that time, however the sport was being coached or taught, there's just so many factors that go into it. The drug testing. I mean, that was a factor in MMA more so than anything I'm talking about. But yeah, I mean, it's more than anything. It's like these guys came up in this era with the right coaching and the right disciplines, to focus on and things like that. If they became world class, in one discipline and use that to become champions, it's just ridiculous to assume that these guys, you wouldn't just take a time machine and drop them in this era and say, yeah, Mark Coleman, go fight Francis Ngannou, or Mark Coleman, go fight John Jones. Man, brutal knees to a grounded opponent. Jeez, that guy's out. Again, this is an old school MMA. The refs used to come in late, and you could do a lot more shit. So, basically the rules were, like no fish hooking, can't be grabbing people's, mouths with your fingers, stuff like that. And like no hitting the balls and scratching, and basically just no overly aggressive, dirty kind of moves, but you could still knee people and do stuff like that in Pride especially. You see full mount there, ground and pound, old school kind of UFC logo on the floor there too, with kind of the guy holding up the belts and the muscle man and all that stuff. So yeah, shout out to Mark Coleman. Definitely a legend and somebody that, deserves his respect. And I'm glad to see that, again, just first of all, that he's okay and his parents are okay. And his family's there with him and taking care of him and things like that. I do believe that there is like a GoFundMe for them right now. If anyone goes on social media, on Instagram or something like that, and finds them, check out Mark Coleman and his family's GoFundMe to support his the fight is still not over. I mean, he had really bad like smoke inhalation issues when he was back into the house to save his parents and look for Hammer. So anyway, but yeah, I want to start out the episode with that kind of timely stuff that's been going on. Show love to the old school a little bit, talk about that sort of stuff. But yeah, again, like I said, the context of all this stuff, if you pick up these guys from back in the day, drop them in the modern eras, their training will be different, right? I don't like to think about it as if like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go take, Mark Coleman, like I was saying, and drop him into modern day and he has to fight the best guys. Like, yes, of course he would probably lose because back in the day, and this goes for heavyweight boxing as well as heavyweight mixed martial arts, heavyweights were a lot smaller. Muhammad Ali was probably like 225, 230, you know what I mean? And Tyson Fury, is 280, and Francis Ngannou is 270, and Anthony Joshua is 250. I mean, Ali might have been 215, honestly, you know what I mean? And that's a lower weight class now, but you think about these guys as heavyweights. Mike Tyson was a heavyweight. He's like 5'10", 220, but at the same time, 5'10", 220, you could lose a little bit of weight, maybe be a cruiserweight or something like that. But at the same time, 220 now, you could fight at heavyweight, But the range is the upper limit is, I don't even think there's an upper limit. I mean, maybe there is in boxing, like 300 or something like that. But again, Francis Ngannou was weighing 270 his last fight. Anthony Joshua was 250. I've seen 280. I mean, it's really in MMA at 265 is the limit. But again, it's 265 down to 206 basically. So Mark Coleman, again, he might not be the natural heavyweight. He might have fought at light heavyweight in this era. Even though he's a big muscly guy at the same time, again, there's context that matters. So if I dropped Mark Coleman into this era as a baby and he came up with the training that some of these guys have and the background some of these guys have in martial arts, and still maybe he was a wrestling, dominant in terms of his discipline and what he kind of implemented on people. Sure. I mean, I still think he'd be better, right? He'd be training different things. He'd be training different ways. He'd at least be training to implement his skill set against these modern skill sets, right? So it's not just all about like, even if somebody didn't become some more dynamic fighter and have all these other disciplines that they were great at, they still would understand how to, again, you work with what they're good at against the opponents of that era. So do I think again, I know I was saying MJ and stuff. Mark Coleman is certainly not MJ. He's certainly not somebody that I would say drop him in this era. And, he comes up in this era, training on the things that they train now, he'd be the best. Like, no, I think that's how I believe MJ would be. And at the same time, MJ is probably an example of somebody, I digress. I'm a big MJ guy. Somebody that I would drop in this era of basketball without any, difference in context and still think he'd be the best. But, going back to MMA, obviously this is an MMA show. Mark Coleman would still be a great fighter for sure. And yeah, just again want to show him that love. So, and also kind of that was my little plug for MJ as well. So moving on to kind of other storylines. So as I said, I'll do a little bit of a quick recap of the kind of fights that maybe I lost out on going over in the last episode due to kind of some technical difficulties. It was mainly, I believe, these last, like Gilbert Burns, Kevin Holland-ish. I talked about Poirier more than anything. Maybe a little bit of Peter Yan I lost there. But yeah, I mean, basically, Peter Yan, Song Yadong, that was a great fight. From last weekend, UFC 299. Peter Yan coming off some losses, and just one of those guys that really has had weird context and is still like elite. But it's one of those things, whatever the context is, if on paper you lost a few times in a row and you're at that elite level and guys that are super elite don't necessarily go from losing a few times to just like, oh, now I'll fight whoever. They are like, you know what? This is who I was. I'm not this guy. I'm not this guy who's a top 15 guy. I'm a top 5, top 3 guy, which is what Peter Yan has basically been for his whole career. Once he kind of entered that realm, you don't see those guys going back and just fighting whoever for a little bit of money, right? They lose the money making ability if they lose more, things like that. So it's just one of those things. Was this a make or break fight? Was this his last fight potentially if he lost? I don't necessarily think that because he really is that good. But he proved it. I mean, people were saying that Song Yadong was basically like Peter Yan light. And I guess on some level, I agree with that. I think Yadong does have a little bit more natural size and power and explosiveness, a little bit natural offensive wrestling background that he couldn't implement on Yan. But basically, Yan, apparently he tore his ACL in the first round too or something. I didn't really notice that in the fight. I did think he was a little bit more hesitant than I expected, even though he does kind of usually take time to download information and then implement his game plan. But yeah, Yan lost the first round, tore his ACL, and apparently he went in there with an injury as well. And just, showed his skill set, showed that he is a little bit of a better version of Song Yadong. He ended up implementing more grappling, and his striking was looking crisper, and he ended up kind of just, taking over the fight with a variety of skill sets and just being a veteran and knowing what to do and kind of adjusting during the fight. So big shout out to Peter Yan. I think that he's going to get a big fight next and maybe one shot away from a rematch against Sean O'Malley, which I do think he won the first fight against O'Malley, which a lot of people do. But I think the second fight will be even better because O'Malley's even better now. So shout out to that. Again, just kind of quickly touching on some of the things I might have missed on the last episode due to those audio issues. Gilbert Burns, Jack Della Maddalena. Burns looked great. He was winning the fight, basically, 2.5 of the 3 rounds he was winning. Maddalena looked really good too. Again, his boxing was super crisp, super on point. Definitely a threat to Gilbert that forced him to kind of grapple more than maybe I think he was always preparing to grapple a lot because that's his more dominant skill set. But Gilbert's a brawler too, and he's a good striker. So I think he did hit Jack with some things that Jack didn't necessarily go down from. And, Gilbert ended up, let me throw the highlights on real quick, actually, to see if there's anything. Yeah, honestly, it's sad for Gilbert. Gilbert can't has recently come out with some kind of post since then, and just he's again his mentality is great. He's a great guy. He's talking about how much he's a big fan of Jack now, and like again, he loves the game, man. He loves the game. He's a dog. He'll fight anybody. He's fighting down in the rankings a lot to fight Jack. Give him this shot, which we're seeing a lot of vets now being put in these positions. Like you got to give these top 10 guys a chance to get to the top 5. You can't just hold on to your ranking. So shout out to Gilbert. I'm a big Gilbert fan. I wanted him to win. Nothing against Jack Della. I just am a big Gilbert fan. We see here, yeah, basically this roll that's happening right now, that was the end of the fight. So Gilbert was in a dominant position, 2 minutes away from winning, basically. Then yeah, just goes in for that. Man, rough. Goes back in to try and get back on top, get that takedown. Rushes in. Jack was ready for it. He's like, yo, I know Gilbert's going to try to take me down. I'm throwing this knee. Gilbert eats it on the chin, neck, face a little bit. I think the thigh hit the face more than anything. But it wobbled him, it rocked him, and Jack again, boom, that's a tough knee. You can't take that. Jack's a strong guy. And then Jack comes in and just finishes the job. Yep, you see more so the thigh, but still really, really strong power. And apparently Jack broke his like left arm in the first round or something like that. And apparently, he did not show it. I will say Gilbert has even said since then in his Instagram videos, Jack did not show it throughout the fight at all, that he broke his arm. And so again, more props to Jack for that, because who knows if like he didn't break his arm, maybe he finishes Gilbert in the second round or something, or maybe he handles the grappling a little bit better. Or, again, so it might have been evened out with that knee. But Jack's gonna get a big fight next. Maybe Ian Gary would be a cool fight to see. And then again, Kevin Holland, Michael Page got cut off a little bit in the last fight. Michael Page proved himself, man. He showed the levels. He showed that he actually does belong in the UFC, but not beyond that. He belongs like possibly in the top 15 or, top 10 of the welterweight division or, whatever division he fights in. Kevin Holland, I love, again, Kevin takes a lot of, he'll fight anybody, and, he really is like you got to give him a lot of props for that. And he's got a lot of skill sets that are really cool too, Kung Fu style, things of that nature. Couldn't close the distance against Michael Page. Michael Page looks very fast. He did get out grappled in the second round, but I believe that they're going to give him more striking matchups in the future. If you throw him with a wrestler right now, it's like Michael Page is getting older. He just got to the UFC. His superstardom is legit, I think, or his potential is legit to be a superstar. He's already a big name in MMA, as well as, from his bare knuckle days, from his Bellator days. UK kickboxing. So again, he's got a lot of fans already, but you want to maximize it, right? So give him more exciting matchups and see what can happen. People are talking about Wonder Boy, and Michael Page even said in an interview recently, two kickboxers, two karate style kickboxers, like if they're that are that elite, which they both are in that discipline, I think Wonder Boy's better, but again, he's shorter and he's older, so it's like we'll see. But yeah, it might just be them feinting a lot and faking and trying to read each other and not throwing a ton and just being, again, super high level if you're understanding what they're looking at and watching it. Very tense. Those fights can be very stressful because you're like, what the hell are they doing? But I definitely, I kind of agree with him. I think like I want to see him against a different style striker and just see what he can do. I think I talked about the Poirier-Saint Denis fight, enough on the last podcast, so I won't address that. But yeah, check out the last podcast. Last episode, I should say, of MMA Full Throttle for the full breakdown of UFC 299 to supplement this little extra I just threw in there. But yeah, so next I want to kind of talk about, I don't know what that was. I want to talk about kind of what's to come in the UFC. So there's a couple different angles there. First of all, the angle I'll take is kind of looking at the next UFC event coming up this weekend on Saturday. I'm recording this on a Friday, so this might come out on Friday or Saturday. But yeah, I want to talk about the next UFC event, as well as just quickly kind of UFC 300. So UFC 300. Let's see what the card looks like. So they just released like the full card here of what the UFC 300 card will be. Pereira versus Hill. Again, I'm a huge Poatan fan. Shout out to Pereira. I think Hill's a great fighter too. I'm looking forward to that. I'm gonna pick Pereira by knockout, but they could either one of those guys could knock out the other one. Man, Zhang Weili. Again, I don't want to do a full recap or breakdown of this because I will do that when it gets close to that fight. But look at this. At the bottom of the card, they got Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage. Do you see a ranking? On any of their names, you see number 1, number 4, and above them, 2 versus 2 in 2 different weight classes, champion versus number 1, champion versus number 1. Even below them, in the prelims, you got number 2 versus number 5, number 8 versus number 2, number 5 versus Kayla Harrison, who's an Olympic double gold medalist coming from a different promotion. Sadiq Youssef, Diego Lopez, number 13 versus a guy who I think is probably going to win that fight and then take his ranking. Early prelims, number 10 versus number 13, number 4 versus number 6, 14 versus a legend, Jim Miller, number 8 versus a guy, former champion who could get a ranking here. So this fight, I mean, this card has, I think they said 11 former champions or something like that, or current or former champions on the card, which is insane. It goes all the way down to the first fight. These guys are both former champions. So at the first fight in the early prelims is 2 former champions. And again, if you don't know who Bo Nickal is, he's I think 3-time national champion in wrestling at Penn State. So again, huge, crazy pedigree background. He's knocking people out. He's got jiu-jitsu skills. He's charismatic. He's somebody that the UFC should be building and could be a future champion one day. He could be, again, he's on this trajectory of is this guy going to be the GOAT one day? I mean, he's got that type of trajectory probably, but he hasn't fought a ranked guy yet. He hasn't fought anyone ranked, let alone anyone, let alone gone on a streak or been champion, right? So again, I'm happy to have him on the card, have him on the UFC 300. Yes, showcase Bo Nickal, show the fans what they don't know about this guy. But he's a minus 1350 favorite. Minus 1350 favorite. Cody Brundage has got wrestling skills. He's a tough guy. He's got knockout power. So again, it's not a bad matchup per se, but again, clearly look at these odds, man. Bo Nickal is supposed to be that guy, and I do think he's going to be that guy. I do think he's going to beat Cody Brundage. Have I seen guys that are this big of favorites lose? Not typically in the UFC. That doesn't happen a lot. But yes, in Bellator and other promotions where they're building up their guy. Look, Cody Brundage has a puncher's chance. Bo Nickal has not. His experience level is not to the level that you'd be like, you know what, he's going to win no matter what. I've seen him against everybody. No, he should win. He probably will win. And it'll be dominant most likely. But Cody Brundage could win. But at the same time, I'm over here selling this. I'm selling this fight right now to you guys. I'm selling it. The UFC and even Bo Nickal he's again no knock against Bo, because he's even come out and said responded to some posts being like Bo should be on the prelims, and he's like probably, or it's like people are like he shouldn't be on the main card, and he's like probably not, because he knows that but he's gonna take the opportunity, he's gonna do well with it. I do feel like there's enough fan backlash right now that they could change this. They could put Bo, back on the prelims. I have seen the UFC adjust these types of things before. Do I think it'd be the best look if they do it? I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where it wouldn't be great for Bo if they did that. They could make him the featured prelim guy. Would definitely not look amazing for him, but everyone would understand at the same time. Man, Yuri Prochazka, number 2 guy, just lost to Alex Pereira for the vacant belt. He was the former champion before he got injured, right? Alexander Rakic is a beast, huge, scary light heavyweight, finally getting a chance against one of the top few guys. Winner of this is going to probably fight the winner of this, right? That's a huge deal. Put these guys on the freaking card. Calvin Kattar, however you pronounce it, I think it's Kattar. But Aljamain Sterling, former flyweight champion. I mean, Jesus. Former bantamweight champion, excuse me. And he's making his debut at featherweight against a top 10 guy. I mean, geez, put him on the card. Holly Holm, former champion, could have been 2-time champion if she wasn't robbed. I'll get into that, another time. But bantamweight debut for Kayla Harrison, who usually fights at featherweight or above. I mean, she is making this debut. We'll see what the weight looks like. It's very highly anticipated. Diego Lopez is a fan. Even this. Sadiq Youssef has more fights in the UFC than Bo Nickal. Diego Lopez probably has about as many. Both super exciting fan favorites. And then boom, early prelims. Jalen Turner Moicano, Money Moicano, who I've talked about before. This is a great matchup at lightweight, which is the deepest division arguably in the UFC, best division arguably in all of MMA across every promotion. You got this on the early prelims. Jessica Andrade, former champion, top 5 still against another top 6 opponent. Again, these are great. Jim fucking Miller is what he wants to come out as, as his name by Bruce Buffer to announce him on that night, which we're all pushing for. Most fights in the UFC, most wins in the UFC. I mean, this guy's a veteran. He's fought on UFC 100, 200, and now 300, and he's on the prelims. I mean, you got to be early prelims. Davison Figueiredo, former flyweight champion. Second fight at bantamweight. He's moving up, and this is his second fight here. Cody Garbrandt, former bantamweight champion. Probably doesn't necessarily deserve this fight. Figueiredo just beat a ranked guy in his debut. Whatever. But this has been a matchup that people have been talking about for a long time. 2 former champions, 2 hard hitters. Cody's got the size advantage by a little bit, probably on Davison, although Davison is super shredded, and I'm sure it's closer than maybe I'm talking about right now. But I'd love to see how their weights are when they get in the cage. Another fight, more deserving, more exciting. But again, Bo Nickal, I hope he does something spectacular. I hope if he does a boring fight or if he loses, holy shit. I mean, again, way more pressure on him now. I think he can take it. So again, I think this is okay. I'm not I'm living with it, I should say. It is what it is. I'm living with it. I don't know about it. It's okay, but it is what it is. There's no bad fights on this card from top to bottom, so I can't be super mad about it. But this is the worst matchup. This is the biggest favorite on the card by far. The least experience between the two by far. The least. Maybe people know Bo Nickal because he's been pushed so much. He's an American and he's Penn State champion. But again, crazy, crazy, crazy that he's on the main card, and everybody's been talking about it. Dana White's put, and again, at the same time, people like I've said on recent episodes, Sean O'Malley, I think Dana White, or I've said on comments on social media, I think Sean O'Malley gets pushed more than he actually is a superstar, or at least I would say more so before last weekend's event. I think now that event, maybe it is getting closer, or maybe it is the same now. But Dana White's talking about how big of a superstar he is. I'm like, he's a superstar, kind of. He's a star, but he's not Conor McGregor. He's not even close. He's not even John Jones, I don't think, or Alex Pereira. I don't even think he's Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira is a huge fan favorite. So. But again, I don't want to. That's not a diss on Sean. Sean, I do think maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm open to being wrong about how big of a superstar he is. But Bo Nickal is not that. But at the same time, like I'm saying, the more you say it, and if you're the promoter and you're saying it and you're pushing him and you're promoting him, that almost like it's like I might be feeling like I'm getting gaslit right now by Dana saying how big of a superstar he is. But as he's saying it, he's helping him become more of a superstar. So anyway, I digress. I mean, that's just it is what it is with that. But crazy. Bo Nickal should not be on the main card of UFC 300. And then the last thing for this episode, I'm going to look ahead at tomorrow's UFC events and just kind of break down some of these fights. Maybe all of them we'll see. Not a ton of fights. I'll talk about the ones I know more than anything. Charalampos Grigoriao, I think I said that right. Not totally sure. Versus Chad Anheliger. I think I've seen Chad fight Canadian once. I got to work on these pronunciations of these guys, but some of them I haven't heard of before. The ones I've heard of, I get right usually. Don't know about this fight. But again, it's the bantamweight, smaller guys. I'm sure it'll be lots of bangers throwing. Oh man, 13 significant strikes landed per minute by Charalampos. Holy shit, that is the most I've fucking seen ever. That's crazy. Usually, Sean O'Malley's at like 7, which is a lot. 13 per minute. Damn, I'm excited. Like I said, I didn't know a lot about these guys, but I'm excited. Looks like a little bit of a kind of more well-rounded skill set over here on the side for Chad and Helliger. So we'll see what happens. But man, 13 strikes per minute. This guy, we'll see what he's got. He's minus 170 favorite, so that's interesting there. But damn, I'm excited for that. Bangers to start, it sounds like, on the card tomorrow. Corey McKenna, Jacqueline Anorim. McKenna, you see only 24, young prospect. Both ladies land similar strikes, similar takedowns. This was a good matchup here. Same odds in reverse, kind of Corey McKenna over here, minus 170 from that first fight. But yeah, that should be a solid fight. Young up-and-comers, look at those skill sets. Thiago Moises here, the big favorite against Mitch Ramirez. Thiago Moises is one of those guys at lightweight that's like, in another division, if it was a different, if it was a similar makeup in lightweight as it was to other divisions, he might be a top 10, top 15 guy. He has been a top 15 guy before, I believe. He's been competitive with some of the really good lightweights as they've been coming up in the division. But he's just like a notch below these top 15 guys at lightweight. But that's to say that the best division in all of MMA across promotions in the UFC as well. I do think there's others that have flyweights exciting, bantamweights. There's a lot of exciting. The UFC is great these days, right? There's a lot of exciting fighters, but lightweight's probably the one. They barely have Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler, and they don't have Khabib anymore, and it's still the best, which is crazy. But yeah, Thiago Moises, I'm excited to see him fight. Great fighter, or really good fighter, I should say at least. Big favorite, but yeah, maybe Mitch Ramirez will come in and get an upset over Moises, the veteran. Then we got Josh Kulibau versus Danny Silva at featherweight. This is going to be bangers too. Man, another 13.6 strikes per minute. Jesus, what is this? Kulibau, he gets knockouts for sure. So if this guy's landing 13 strikes a minute to 2, I mean, geez. Kulibau's got pop, he's got power. I've seen him get, dropped. I've seen him drop people. Hard not to, he's the favorite, Kulibau. So again, it seems like there's a lot of like newcomers on this card, or guys who are working their way up against some more veteran people. But geez, got to be a knockout. All right, so I would say like 3 out of the first 4 fights tomorrow on Saturday. Again, whenever you're listening to this, for this UFC Fight Night, Tai Tuivasa headlining, gonna be bangers. Looks like 3 out of the first 4. Jafale Filo versus Odie Osborne. Man, that's going to be a good one too. Again, all these smaller guys and smaller ladies, they throw a lot more volume and a lot more techniques, and they flow very fluidly in the grappling and the striking. So it's going to be exciting to see this. Odie Osborne, I've seen have some success in the UFC. For sure. I've seen him make a few, poorly timed like strikes that have left him open and he's gotten dropped and things like that. So that's kind of what I'm sticking in my head right now, but I do think he's a very good fighter. So yeah, he's another minus 170 plus 140. A lot of good matchups here on this card. I don't know enough about Jafale to really say anything about this fight in terms of who I'm picking, but I do like Odie Osborne and his team, and so looking forward to that fight as well. Getting up here towards the end of the prelims, got another ladies fight, women's bantamweight, Chelsea Chandler versus Josine Nunez. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't know a lot about these ladies, to be honest, too, so I'll probably just skip that. Sorry. No disrespect. I do think, actually, no, Nunez, I've seen, she's got some pop here. You see 7.22 strikes per minute. I believe she's coming off of a KO win, so reasonable favorite. She's not to judge a book by its cover, but she's got the buzz cut, she's got the tats, she looks pretty yoked. I mean, she just looks like a bruiser. So, I feel like she's gonna come in and get the KO just off of that alone. But gonna be looking forward to that fight as well. 33 versus 30. She's a little bit younger, so yeah, I'll give Nunez the nod there. Then we got Nathan Levy versus Mike Davis. Should be more of a, again, lightweights, not quite at the lower weight classes. I know people say 170 and below, 155. It depends how big you are, maybe how you're evaluating these guys and how small they are. Levy I believe he's fighting out of Israel. Yeah, so I have seen him fight before. Not to get into any Israel, political stuff right now, but I have seen him fight before. Good fighter, one loss. Looks like he's the big underdog though to Mike Davis. So Davis is a vet. I think Nathan has less UFC experience, but I could be wrong on that. But yeah, I've seen Davis fight before. I'm probably going to lean towards Davis here. He's a huge favorite, so that's probably the pick there. But yeah, so I know I kind of ran through those, didn't know as much about those fighters. But getting into the main card for tomorrow, looking pretty good. Let me see what time is looking like here. 35, 36. Man, my bad if I was just talking. I was just talking that whole time and not showing anybody anything. Jeez Louise. But yeah, this is what I was looking at here before. So yeah, Shara Lampos, that was that first fight, the 13 significant strikes, looking crazy. Here's the ladies, Corey McKenna, kind of a prospect more than anything, but she's getting a good matchup now. And Jacqueline Amorim, excuse me. Thiago Moises is the vet I was talking about. You see kind of the breakdown here. Here's the Coulibaly fight. As I said, Coulibaly's, he's the favorite, and I'm leaning in his direction because of the pop I've seen him display, but 13.6 strikes per minute is kind of crazy. Here's that Jafale Filo, Odie Osborne fight I talked about. I like Odie, so we'll see what happens there. Not totally sure. Here's that Josine Nunez, Chelsea Chandler. Nunez over here looking just like a bully, you know what I mean? Like, again, not to judge her book, she could be the sweetest person ever, but just that aesthetic, again, you see someone like that, you're like, man, she looks like she's coming to bang, she's coming to, do work, throw her hands, 7.22 strikes a minute, pretty nice. Here's Nathan Levy, Mike Davis, I kind of briefly talked about. But yeah, Gerald Meerschaert versus Brian Barberena at middleweight. Barberena's a vet. He's, I think he beat Robbie Lawler, not in his last fight, but within the last few fights. Meerschaert has a ton of submissions in the UFC. He's kind of most famous known for getting knocked out in like 10 seconds by Hamzat Chimaev, but he's had a nice kind of streak. I think he's got like one loss in his last 5 fights, something like that. Going, you see the submission. Let me see the submission average, 1.53. I mean, he's throwing submissions up like crazy. He's got some power, but he's not the best striker, kind of slow. Barberena is more of a brawler, great cardio. I'm expecting that, Barberena is going to put it on him. But Meerschaert is always like in rough positions on his back, getting beat up sometimes, and he just is so dangerous with the submissions that I'm going to lean towards Meerschaert here. We see he's the favorite, minus 245. I'm going to say Meerschaert gets a submission win. That's honestly like a good bet. A lot of the time is for him to get a submission win. He's that statistically often does do that, so pretty cool right there. Macy Chiasson versus Pani Akianza. We see Macy's the kind of big favorite here. Macy's a great fighter, man. She's like been up and down different weight classes. Kind of, she's one of those tall fighters, 5'11", one of the tallest women in UFC. Really good striker, but again, an advanced skill set. She reminds me a lot of Corey Sandhagen. I hope, if Corey ever heard that, I hope he wouldn't take it the wrong way. I think Corey's better than Macy. He's a more elite version, and he's a man, so he's fighting in a different context as well. But I just think like Macy's got the range. She's moving. She's not as fast as Corey, or again, she's not as good as Corey, but she just reminds me of that style. Like she has wrestling, she has jujitsu, she has striking. She's lanky, she's long. You know what I mean? So her last fight was a really good fight against Irene Aldana, um, where she ended up she was kind of winning that fight. It looked like she might steal the decision, and then she got like up kicked from the bottom. Aldana just kicked her perfectly in the liver and just TK finished, knocked her out with a liver shot. She couldn't get up, her organs shut down. I've talked about that before. So that's like exciting there. Good fight, good two fights to start the main card. Christian Rodriguez, Isaac Dulgarian. Rodriguez is 26, 27, 26 versus 27, one loss versus no losses. Isaac Dulgarian is the favorite here. I've seen Rodriguez fight before. I think he's definitely a prospect to look after. But man, look at these averages here: 7.2 strikes, 0.3 strikes almost to 3.5 for Isaac Dulgarian, leading that over Rodriguez. Man, 3 takedown average, 3.13 compared to 1.4. More accurate with the striking for Isaac as well. Better takedown accuracy. So again, he's got 100%. But going for 3.3 a fight, I mean, in his 6 fights, they have 100% accuracy. Like, and that striking. Whew. I mean, I don't like to make. I feel super confident making picks when I've seen guys fight or seen ladies fight, because I just feel like I have knowledge. I've watched them fight. I know their tendencies. I've seen them against different matchups, things like that. Looking at just pure stats doesn't do it for me typically, but man, these stats are jumping off the board. The reach is only a half-inch advantage for Rodriguez. Nothing crazy there. Sometimes leg reach is like, I wish they would put that out there because some guys have really long legs and that could be a factor. But both orthodox, same size basically. Yeah, I'm gonna go towards Dulgarian here for this fight. I'm not sure if he has as much. He doesn't have as much experience, so we'll see. But I think he's gonna come out hot. Usually undefeated guys that have stats like this are gonna come out with that confidence of like, I can't be touched. So excited for that. He's the favorite, -190 to +160. So that's interesting. Holy shit, Ovince St. Preux. I didn't even know he was still in the UFC. Hate to say that about my guy. He's a vet. He fought John Jones for a belt and lost one time. It was a kind of a John Jones return years ago after suspension, and he looked John Jones. It was like his least dominant win at the time. Excuse me. But yeah, he's a legend. 26 and 17. You see those. Man, he's been a vet for a long time. Hasn't looked great in his last bunch of fights. Looks slower and slower, and just I don't know what he's got left necessarily. Big, strong guy, veteran, so I give him a lot of props. We see -800 for Kennedy Nchukwu, and that is, or excuse me, Zekchukwu. Man, I feel like I said it right the first time, but anyway, 4.86. Again, he's like, I've seen Kennedy knock out people. I'm gonna say his first name just until I get the last name perfect. But I've seen Kennedy knock people out. He was kind of coming up as a prospect recently. He's 31. He's not super old compared to 40 for Ovince St. Preux. Again, this is light heavyweight, so it's not quite the same as the lower weight classes, but it ain't heavyweight. So, but yeah, Kennedy got the longer reach, 83 inches. I think he's going to throw more volume. I think he's going to feel like this is my time. It's not Ovince St. Preux's time. So I'm leaning heavy on Kennedy for this. Kind of looking at all these fights, before I get into the last couple that I was talking about, definitely feel the most confident about Kennedy winning that fight. Thiago Moises should probably win his fight. That's a good one there, but I don't know enough about the other guy. Again, when I know about both of them, it makes it very easy to. So again, Gerald Meerschaert, Brian Barberena. I could see Barberena like toughing out a brawl decision or something, but I'm big on Macy, big on Gerald, big on Kennedy. Brian Battle's only a -185 favorite fighting at welterweight. Damn, Ange Lusa, Jesus, that guy looks big. I mean, 5'10" welterweight. He looks huge in his profile picture. So. But, he's not quite as tall as Brian Battle. I'm like 6 foot 6'1". I weigh probably 185-ish, 190 right now. So, like, I would fight, in theory, I'd fight at welterweight probably. Some guys, maybe I'd be a weight bully and try to cut to lightweight. Again, I got a lot of muscle on me, so I'm not sure how 155 would go. But 170 would probably be my weight class, right? So I'm looking at Ange Lusa, and I'm like, he's big. That's a big dude. He's probably cutting a lot of weight to get down here. Brian Battle was fighting at middleweight. He was definitely undersized for that. He's looked great since then. His kind of dropping down with that, the size advantage and the strength of those guys was a problem for him. But he's been, finishing people. He was the Ultimate Fighter winner of this last season for the middleweights when he fought on the Ultimate Fighter Conor McGregor versus Team Michael Chandler. So that was exciting and cool. Really cool guy. I saw him post recently on Instagram, kind of talking about, can I get some Goku colored shorts, UFC shorts, like kind of orange and blue, kind of to honor Akira Toriyama, who passed away recently, the creator of Dragon Ball. So shout out to Akira Toriyama. But yeah, anyway, Brian Battles, I like Brian Battle a lot. I think he's more and more confident. I think a lot of people are like, is this guy going to be a problem? Like, people aren't totally sure about Brian Battle yet. I think he's leaning towards being a problem. He's got that dog. He really, I hate to say that, but I mean, he's got that dog in him. He really does. So shout out to Brian Battle. I'm going to lean towards him. I've never seen Angel Lusa fight, but I'm riding with Team Battle. Younger, longer reach, taller, moved down to a new weight class that he's been doing well. He's been training with killers too. According to his Instagram, looks like he's just always in there in the gym. Again, Angel Lusa might be the man, and I might not know anything, but Brian Battle, I'm going to lean that direction as well, and so does the money line. So last fight, kind of last thing I'll talk about for this episode as well. Tai Tuivasa facing Marcin Tybura, both major veterans. Tybura a little bit more of a veteran of the game, but they've both been in the UFC for a while. 15-6 versus 24-8. Tybura's probably fought a little bit more variety of these elite heavyweights, but Tuivasa's basically fought just as many, if not the same amount. Close to the same amount. So Tuivasa's coming off of, I think, 3 straight losses, all finishes, but all against the elite guys. He lost to Cyril Gane in a kind of competitive fight, but he ended up kind of getting knocked out at the end. I don't want to say kind of. He got knocked out. It was TKO, but he hurt Cyril in that fight, and he looked good, and that was kind of a number one contender fight. He might have fought John Jones if he won that fight. So big deal. Then he gets knocked out by Sergey Pavlovich, who was the kind of the scariest guy in the division until he got knocked out by Tom Aspinall for that interim belt. So again, he's right knocking at the door of these interim fights, title fights. And then he got finished by Alexander Volkov, who was like 6'7", Russian. Again, the range was really hard for Tai to get around. He's more of a brawler. He's only 6'2", for that weight class, not the tallest. And yeah, he couldn't get closer. He was getting just battered kind of with the range, the jabs, the straight punches. Volkov's got some power too, got some pop. Anyway, heavy hands. And then he just beat him up, and then he choked him out, and that was that. So it's a bounce back fight for Tai. He's a fan favorite. He's known for doing shoeies when he wins, or when he loses, I guess sometimes too, where he's like basically it's some Australian thing, I guess, where you like take someone. It could be anyone's shoe. It could be his shoe. Could be a fresh shoe, but usually it's like a random person's shoe, which is gross. And then he spits in it. Sometimes he has other people spit in it. It's just fucking whatever. It's disgusting. And then they pour a beer in it, and he just drinks the whole thing. Very exciting. And again, good for Tai. He's kind of a slob sort of look guy, but I don't mean that in any negative way. He's cool and he's the man. Obviously, he'd knock my ass out too. It's not even about the fear. It's just like that's his personality, and he's the man. So we're all kind of rooting for Tai. Marcin Tybura is like nobody like dislikes him maybe for the fact that there's just nothing really bad about him, but they might dislike him because he's like boring fighter or he ends up beating their good fighters that you want to see advance because he just can like take the punishment and then just wear them out and they get tired. I've seen that against like Walt Harris and other people that I thought would beat Marcin Tybura. He ends up beating. So he's like hung around. He's like a gatekeeper. I don't want to say gatekeeper exactly because he's been approaching elite status at times, but aesthetically not the most elite fighter. Got a little bit of power, not a lot of power. His best attribute is probably his gas tank. He's got a great gas tank for a heavyweight and a great chin. But he got TKO'd by Tom Aspinall, I think in his last fight. And Tai is probably gonna come in for the knockout, come in hot. I'm leaning towards Tai minus 115 to minus 105. So he's a really slim favorite. Kind of in my heart, I want Tai to win. He's younger, 31 versus 38. So again, leading that direction. But Tai's just got to be smart, and he's got to pick his shots, and he's got to prepare for it to be a full 5-round fight. I think the longer the fight goes, it favors Tybura heavily. If Tai Tuivasa can pick his shots, choose his shots, Tybura's not going to throw crazy volume at him, so he just needs to kind of control the striking battle and avoid the grappling. And I think Tai will end up getting the win, maybe by decision. But Tai's a knockout artist, so definitely knockout is a good shot too. I'm going to lean towards Tai. But it's a great matchup just because of Tybura's ability to cancel out other guys the way he does. That's the best way I could describe it. He's not imposing his will as much as he's just canceling out their power by protecting himself a little bit or just eating the shots and kind of just wearing on them, and they end up losing. So that's the gist of it. Again, sorry for that one moment where I was like talking and showing stuff and actually not showing stuff. I wanted to be showing stuff. Did a quick little recap there at the end of that. But yeah. This episode, 48 minutes. Again, I'm going to try to keep, each episode, under an hour, so that's more digestible for everybody, but also to maybe branch out further and do even shorter episodes more often throughout the week. But yeah, the format's typically going to be MMA news stuff, recapping events, breaking down future events, things of that nature. But as this kind of rolls, on Tuesday nights, if you're watching the streams with Black Gritty, myself and Jason for Gritty Nights, then that will be an opportunity to throw in, hey Harry, I watched your last Aristotle, I watched the last episode of MMA Full Throttle. What I want to hear your thoughts on that. Happy to answer questions on those streams, as well as on future videos, MMA episodes. So yeah, just keep me posted on that sort of stuff. Appreciate anyone who's listening, watching on YouTube, watching on Spotify. Really appreciate that. All the followers, we appreciate that a lot as well. Please subscribe to Black Gritty on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, soon to be Twitch probably as well, as I've been saying, Spotify. And yeah, we appreciate you very much for listening. This has been Aristotle. Stay tuned for the next episode, and I'll catch you all later. Thanks.